Yo, what's good, Spirit Squad? As always, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and make sure to read the video description. That's where all the good information like deck lists, contact information, and everything else is going to be. Today, we're going to go over a new Pioneer deck list and some of your answers, so stay tuned for some sweet spooky content. So 3 times 9 equals 27 asks, I'm pretty sure I'm right on this, but it'd be nice to get a judge ruling on disturb mechanic. When you disturb a spirit creature, that can be done with flash via rattle chains, or does the game see you casting it as an enchantment? A similar question in regards to Cavern of Souls. Got it, okay. So regardless of whatever is on the front half of your disturb card, when you disturb a card in your graveyard, it is only going to consider whatever the back half of that card is. So if you disturb a card and the back half is a spirit spell, then not only can you cast it at instant speed with rattle chains, it will also be uncounterable if you use Cavern of Souls to cast it. So it is going to count as a spirit for that entire thing, even if the front side is something entirely different like a human. The same thing will go for the enchantments, the ones out of Crimson Vow. So if, for example, you cast a card like Dorothea, and actually we can pull her up. So if we cast Dorothea's Retribution out of the graveyard, this card is an enchantment. Even though the front half, Dorothea, is a creature, your opponent will still be able to cast a negate on Dorothea's Retribution because you are not casting a creature spell in any way, shape, or form. The only time that the front half is considered for the card is when either A, it is not on the stack, or B, the card is on the table and you need to think about what its converted mana cost is. So, for example, if you have actually this card right here, Dorothea's Retribution. So this card is in your graveyard, you can cast it as a Dorothea's Retribution, but your opponent can still exile it with a card like Cling to Dust, which specifically cares about whether the card you're exiling is a creature or not. Since Dorothea, the front half, is a creature, that opponent is going to gain 3 life and not draw a card. Even though Dorothea's Retribution, when you cast it, your opponent can still cast a card like Negate or Force a Negation or Dovin's Veto at it because you're not ever casting a creature spell. So I hope that covered that a little bit more in full. Yo, so Thomas asks, thoughts on Winged Portents in your next video? Hey, that would be now. So as far as Winged Portent goes, if I'm being completely honest, I'm not super high on that card, but let's go over it anyway. So Winged Portent, for anybody who doesn't know, it's going to be a 3 mana instant, 1 in double blue, and it's going to draw a card for each creature with flying you control. So you'd think that would be a card that's naturally suited to be a spirit thing, right? The problem I have with Winged Portent is that when you cast it, you are not casting something that actively adds to the table. Drawing cards is super cool, and it's a problem that Spirits has had for a while, but we just got 2 cool sources of card advantage in the same set. So the first one, and of course the most obvious one in my opinion, is going to be the new Cemetery Illuminator. And this card's pretty cool because when you exile a creature with its enter the battlefield or its attack effect, then you'll be able to cast creature cards off the top of your deck, getting you virtual card advantage. So this card is still relatively sweet, and it adds to the board. That's something that Winged Portent doesn't do. The other one that I have in mind here is something that I mentioned in the last video, and that's going to be Welcoming Vampire. And rather than virtual card advantage, this provides actual card advantage. You straight up get to draw a card every time. Well, not every time, once a turn. Once a turn when you play a creature with mana cost 2 or less and it hits the table. So this is going to be actual card advantage, and even though it's not a spirit, I think that's still good enough for us to consider playing. And rather than another card that's already existed like Mentor of the Meek, Welcoming Vampire flies. So this one's a 2/3 flyer. You don't have to pay mana when your creature enters the table. And I think the fact that Welcoming Vampire is a flyer is enough to consider putting Welcoming Vampire into our Spirits decks, because being a flyer, you're not basically locking one of your own creatures out of combat. If you were to play something like Mentor of the Meek, which is a 2/2 non-flyer, and you have to pay 1 mana to draw a card whenever a creature with power 2 or less enters the table, well, that creature can't really attack through most things in Pioneer, and definitely nothing in Modern. So I'm a little less high on that card, but Welcoming Vampire, since it's a flyer, I like this card a lot, and I think I will end up trying this in at least one build. So even though I don't necessarily like Winged Portent, I do like both of the other card advantage options that we got out of this exact same set. So if you are running out of cards while playing Spirits yourself, then we've got a couple of ways to help mitigate that. So I look forward to trying these with y'all. Economician says, Economician? Economicon? Hip Hop Anonymous? I like the synergy between Hateful Eidolon and a new Counterspell. Also, if you're splashing black, why not play the new Kaya with Lingering Souls? I also think the new aura Nurturing Presence would be really good with Hateful Eidolon. Okay, so there's a lot of cards to go over here. And this will also bring us to the deck list that I've arrived at. So today's deck list is going to be a Pioneer bit, and it's going to be blue-black, not blue-white, because we are going to be playing Hateful Eidolon, and we're going to be playing a couple of other black cards, but mostly mono blue spirits otherwise. And that's going to give us the chance to play the new counterspell, the Geistlight Snare. Excuse me. Unfortunately, in Pioneer, Lingering Souls is not a legal Magic card in that format. So the format stops at Return to Ravnica, so just after Lingering Souls was printed. But we can check out the new aura Nurturing Presence, and we can check out the new Kaya as well, so that would be kind of cool. So let's do that. Let's Nurturing Presence. What is this? So it's an enchantment creature for 1 and a white. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, this creature gets +1 until end of turn, and when it enters the battlefield, you get a 1/1 spirit token with flying. I understand that it has synergy with Geistlight Snare, but I don't think this is a powerful enough effect to justify playing this card. If Nurturing Presence did something super powerful on its own, then I think I could justify it, but to be completely honest, I don't think this is it. Let's check out the new Kaya, because I know she's black and white and costs like 3, but I do not remember what she does. So what do we got here? Kaya Geist Hunter. So she starts at 3 loyalty, 1 a white and a black, +1. Creatures you control get Death Touch. Put a +1 on one of those creatures. Or, wait. On up to 1 target creature token. It has to be a token. Okay. -2 until end of turn. If 1 or more tokens would be created under your control, you get twice that many. -6, exile all cards from all graveyards. Then you get a 1/1 spirit flying token for every card exiled this way. I don't like it. So if you were to play a deck that was trying to play things like, say, Intangible Virtue, Lingering Souls, like Spectral Procession, stuff like that, and say, like, modern black-white tokens, then sure, I think I can understand that. But this isn't that. If we're just playing, like, a tempo spirit deck, then I can even understand playing Esper, because if you wanted to play, like, say, Hateful Eidolon and Spellqueller in the same deck, that right there is going to be 3 colors. So if that's something that you wanted to try to do, then I can totally understand you wanting to be into 3 colors for something like that, but I don't think that this specific Kaya is really going to get the job done. I do, however, like the idea of Kaya Orzhov Usurper. So if you're already inclined to play something Esper flavored, Kaya Orzhov Usurper is really good. But like I said, that's actually going to bring us right over to our deck list. So you know what? Let's go over that. As always, thanks for your questions and everything. Keep them coming. These are fun. These are interesting. And we're going to check out today's deck list before jamming some games. So this is going to be our deck list of the day. We're going to be playing blue-black spirits, And our blue-black spirits deck is going to feature some relatively new things here. This is going to be awesome. I like it a lot. And if you want to check out the deck list later, the deck list will be right in the description for you too. So the idea here is that we get to replace Lofty Denial with the new counterspell, Geistlight Snare. Again, it's going to be one less if you control a enchantment and one less if you control a spirit. And unlike Lofty Denial, it is always a mana leak. So even if you somehow get in a sad face scenario where you're just casting Geistlight Snare for full price, it's still going to be counter unless you can pay 3. Where if you cast Lofty Denial and you don't have a flyer on the table, then your opponent only has to pay 1. So Geistlight Snare has the potential to probably counter a lot more spells at just base level than Lofty Denial can. So that's already kind of a leg up, right? But then you get to cast this thing for 1 instead of 3, and that's just super dope. To make that happen, we've got 8 enchantments in the deck here. We've got Hateful Eidolon, which is both an enchantment and a spirit, and we've got 4 copies of Curious Obsession, meaning that we are going to be playing a very, very low to the ground tempo-based deck. Here we've got 4 Mausoleum Wanderers, 4 Hateful Eidolons, and 4 Spectral Sailors to make sure that we can get the absolute most out of our Curious Obsessions. So we've got 12 1-drops to make sure that we always have fuel for our obsessions when we are trying to cast and resolve those things on turn 2. And even if the creature you're playing with is not a Hateful Eidolon, still, if you have like a Spectral Sailor with a Curious Obsession on it, that is both a creature and an enchantment, so your Geistlight Snare is still just going to cost 1. In this deck, the other black card that we're playing in a main is going to be Drown in the Loch. So that card, of course, pulls just like infinite multiple duties here, but you get to have just like another good cheap counterspell to just provide a hard counter for like later in the game, but also it just deals with so many things that you would otherwise not really be able to deal with in most other builds of spirits. So Drawn in a Lock, if your opponent even has like 2 cards in the graveyard, it deals as removal against most of the format. So if you want to play against something like, say, Winota, if you want to get rid of Shark Typhoon tokens, if you want to deal with things from like black-white humans or auras or something aggressive, then Drawn in a Lock can be a removal spell, and that is already like worth your time when you're using the same spots to play counterspells against the control and tempo decks of the format too. So I think Drawn in a Lock is actually just like an A1 magic card in this style of deck, even though you don't get to control how many cards go to your opponent's graveyards like you would in like a mill deck, for example. I still think Drawn in a Lock is worth your time here. And everything else is pretty normal, right? Like we've got Rattlechain, Shacklegeist, Supreme Phantom, and one thing you may have noticed about our lovely curve here is that we are not playing any 3-drops. And that is because in our sideboard, this deck gets to play a copy of Lurrus. So we also get a companion. So this deck is super low to the ground, ultra tempo, and I think you get some really powerful stuff out of here. Like Curious Obsession plus you see a guard approach is already a great way to make sure that you're able to keep up with your opponents on cards. When you're only attacking for like 2 and 3 a turn, getting to draw cards along the way really does go a long way. So I really enjoy the fact that we get to play so many low to the ground ways to make it so our opponent can't just like body us. Like we get to play a Guard Approach, we get to play Geistlight Snare, Mausoleum Wanderer can protect something else from removal by sacrificing itself. You still get access to Rattle Chains. Supreme Phantom and Shacklegeist are just as good as ever. Drawn in a Lock pulls double duty as a hard counter spell and a removal spell, especially against Shark Typhoon, because regardless of how many cards your opponent has in the graveyard, Shark tokens are CMC 0. So Drawn in a Lock will always be able to kill a Shark token, which is huge game because we hate Shark Typhoon. And we've got 21 lands in the main here. So we've got 4 Watery Graves, 4 Drowned Catacombs, 4 Clear Water Pathways, and 2 copies of Shipwrecked Marsh. And I'm leaning towards maybe adding 1 or 2 more black sources, like replacing, for example, a basic island with something like 1 Mana Confluence, just so that we can a little more reliably play Hateful Eidolon on turn 1. I think 14 black sources is pretty good, but it could be the case that we end up needing more than that. We'll see. And out of the sideboard, we've got a lot of stuff that I enjoy going over here too. So here we've got a full 4 copies of Fatal Push, again to help with a lot of these aggressive decks. We've got 2 copies of Thoughtseize, 3 copies of Collective Brutality because Burn sucks. That's all I gotta say about that. Burn's not great. This specific list, being black-blue, does not have the worst burn matchup because Collective Brutality is really good against them. But also, Hateful Eidolon has lifelink. And if you can, pump it up a little bit with either your Supreme Phantom or your Curious Obsession, you're going to get multiple points of life back every turn, and that's a pretty big game. And the fact that Drawn in the Lock can either counter important spells like Wizard's Lightning or Borrow's Charm, or get rid of their creatures like Eidolon of the Great Revel, is also a big deal in Game 1, because that means you can actually deal with what they're doing. And of course, Lurrus itself has lifelink. So there's lots of ways to deal with what they're doing. And then we also have 3 copies of Mystical Dispute. And I think that's probably going to be good enough as far as Counterspell suites, because we've got Mystical Dispute, Geistlight Snare, Drawn in the Lock, Mausoleum Wanderer, You See a Guard Approach. We have lots of ways to interact with what our opponents are doing. So I don't necessarily know that this deck needs more counterspells in the sideboard. But the anti-control plan of just being like Mystical Dispute, Thoughtseize, and then also just having the ability to play spirits against control decks is probably going to be a good enough plan. But again, we'll see. But I think I like where this deck goes. I think this is really interesting. And the fact that this allows us to play a sweet tempo game with a new counterspell and a couple of other cool toys, I think that's going to be enough for me to be really excited about this. So let's go ahead and jump in some games. A bit of a heads up. Since I have been a little under the weather over the last couple of days, my bad, this is going to be games where you do not hear my voice when actually playing through the games. And I actually didn't even play all 5 rounds, I only played the first 3. So that's going to be our little bit of a spoiler there. I'll throw on some music or something while we get to have the games going, but the self-commentary is not here for this video. But whatever, I feel better now, so I expect to have it back by the time I play Magic again. Just a bit of a heads up, but enjoy! So a few closing thoughts on this list. So far, I like it. We played 3 rounds, we won 3 rounds, and they were against all kinds of different decks, including some of the most popular things in the format. We got to play against Winota, which is easily the most popular deck in the format. We got to play against Control, which is right up there, and we got to play against Black White Auras, which is a deck that, while it's not at the top of the meta right now, it is very popular, and it's also, like Spirits, one of the challenger decks. So that's going to be something that you really should expect people to be playing, especially if you're playing Magic IRL instead of online. So I'm actually really glad that our 3 rounds that we got to play got to highlight the deck's power against 3 of the decks you should probably expect to see the most in the coming weeks. So things that I like so far include the fact that the black spells worked really well. Like Drawn in the Lock was really good, as both a removal spell and a counter spell. We got to play almost all of our sideboard cards actually mattered, and we didn't face burn in our 3 rounds, so the collective brutalities didn't come in. But there was an excuse to put in everything else here, and that's already pretty exciting. It's good to know that the choices you make when sideboarding come up. So I'm pretty excited to play this deck a little more, tune it for the future, and then see if this really has staying power, or if I'm just kind of wild and because I happen to win 3 rounds in a row or whatever the deal is, right? We'll find out with time. But what I'm going to say here is just, let me know what your opinions on this list are. Is this something you like? Do you think the Hateful Eidolon plus Geistlight Snare is just way too cute of a package? Or do you think this is something that really could have more staying power? Do you think playing black with Hateful Eidolon is worth our time more than playing the 1/1 lifelinker, that's not as good as Hateful Eidolon, but still has lifelink, and that'll still let you play things like Spell Queller, Watch of the Spheres? Do you maybe like that idea a little better than playing with these black cards we have right now? Either way, let me know what you feel is, a little more correct for the Pioneer meta right now, or if you think that this list is fine and you're going to try it yourself. But either way, like always, if you like what you're watching, make sure to click like and let me know. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and I will see y'all on the next one.